Welcome to the Growth Over Grades podcast, a show connecting you with thought leaders, pioneers, and change agents who are leading the charge to support schools and districts in making the shift toward competency-based education and to promote growth over grades. I'm Jordan Lewis, and on the show today, we have school climate champion and innovative leader earning the 2024 ESC Region 2 Superintendent of the Year, Dr. Michelle Cavazos, Superintendent of Gregory-Portland Independent School District in Portland, Texas. Under her transformational leadership, Gregory-Portland ISD has undergone a remarkable evolution, characterized by authentic, inclusivity, and operational excellence. Dr. Cavazos has championed initiatives that foster a positive school climate while emphasizing every child's potential and the value of each moment in their educational journey. Her collaborative approach and commitment to empowering staff have created a culture of individual ownership and consistent feedback where every voice is heard. Dr. Cavazos has united the community through a clear vision and mission, building a foundation of trust and transparency. With experience spanning rural, suburban, and inner-city school management, Michelle brings a wealth of knowledge for her roles as Chief Officer of School Leadership and Academics, Director of Secondary Education, Principal at all levels, and now Superintendent. Her process-driven collaborative approach to system improvement has left a lasting positive impact on every district that she's served. Today, we explore how Michelle's leadership philosophy has shaped Gregory-Portland ISD, discuss strategies for cultivating a growth-oriented educational environment, and delve into the importance of building genuine relationships with the school community. Now, to my conversation with Dr. Michelle Cavazos. Michelle, it's so amazing to have you on the show. I'm really excited for today's show for a lot of reasons. Not to foreshadow too much, but a lot of the work that you're doing and the successes that you're having in Gregory-Portland ISD is near and dear to my heart. But Michelle, thank you so much for joining us here on the show today.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here, sharing a little bit about our journey here.
And to kind of kick it off, speaking of journeys, Michelle, talk to us a little bit about your background in education and the journey that you've taken to get where you are today.
Yeah, well, thank you. I actually just completed my 30th year in education and I grew up in Iowa, but then started my first year in Texas. And I was like, I'm going to try it for a year. If I don't like it, I'm going to go back. And now 30 years later, I'm still here. So I've had the opportunity to be a teacher in the Houston area in Galena Park ISD, moved up and was an assistant principal, been an elementary principal, been a principal of 2 schools at the same time, middle school principal, high school principal, central office, and now superintendent, and have been in the Houston area, Austin area, North San Antonio, and now in the Coastal Bend. So I've gotten to be around different parts of the state of Texas and see what's similar and what's different across the different parts.
And I'm just curious, obviously with a state that large, what are some of the differences that you were finding as you were moving through these different leadership positions?
Mm-hmm. Some of the differences was size. You know, right now I'm in the smallest district I've ever been in. I've got just over 5,000 students. And then the largest district I worked in was Austin ISD, where we had 130 schools and about 75,000 students. And just interesting, each district's been different on its funding. You know, like where I am currently, we are high property wealth because we have a lot of industry. But I've been in districts that are complete opposite, that are homeowners as the tax base. And so that looks different as far as the revenue that's generated.
Right.
And then also just looking at the demographics of economics in a district. Some, I've been in one where we had the richest of the rich and some of the most poverty kids in the greatest amount of poverty. Sure. And trying to serve that dichotomy within the same system. So it's been really fascinating getting to be in all these different systems, but the common thread being we're about kids and making, removing barriers for kids regardless of their background, and trying to level that playing field so that every child can graduate and be successful in whatever they choose once they leave our systems.
It's pretty inspirational to hear you pull it back to the idea of we're about kids. We speak to a lot of leaders, and a common thread that I hear in speaking with leaders is that it's super easy for us to forget that we're doing this work for kids when you're dealing with all of the priorities and the balancing of so many things. So it's really nice to hear that that's the commonality and the thread you're pulling out from all the different districts you've had the opportunity to work in is that, hey, it is about the kids at the core. That's why we do what we do.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you mentioning that, because I think about, like, I never imagined I'd be a superintendent, and the things that I deal with on a day-to-day basis are so, I don't get to engage with kids as much as I would like to, but I'm also conscious of all the different partnerships and relationships that I build externally have an impact on our kids. And I'm very intentional about the relationships I build and looking at how can they positively impact our students in our system, and not just our system, but around the state and potentially around the nation.
Absolutely. The relationships both in and outside of the community are critical. I think it's also an important call out that when you're thinking about some of that intentional relationship building, you have the students in your community at mind. But I'm learning that the best success of school districts are when they get the chance to collaborate with other districts and pool resources and share. And it's nice that it seems like some of that intentionality is kind of coming out with the relationships you're fostering in your community as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I kind of wonder, I started as a superintendent during COVID, like the summer of 2020. And so at that time, everyone was kind of a first year superintendent along with me. And there was a lot of connectivity across districts during that time, because people were saying, how are you navigating this? How are you doing that? So I don't know what it was like for superintendents or district leaders before COVID fully. But afterwards, I've seen, even in our region, especially, just how we collaborate, and this across the state. There's so many different tools and resources now that facilitate that, where you don't have to be in person, right. But where we can share ideas and take from the best and even elevate them and make them even better.
Absolutely. And I love that technology enables us to get the chance to connect. Like even now, I mean, Michelle, you're down in Texas. I'm way up in Toronto, and it's like, we're able to have this amazing conversation, and technology allows us to do that. And there's so many really interesting technologies that are happening with durable skill development, where students get the chance to connect with students across the globe that we never had the chance to do. But there is also a lot of value in person. And that's actually kind of where I got to meet you. I got the chance to see you speak at an event, and you did facilitate a session. It was called Empowering Tomorrow's Leaders. And that resonated with me heavily in the work that we're doing. And you leaned into discussing the portrait of a graduate at your district as a way to begin to empower some students. So could you just talk to us here a little bit about the connection to your portrait of a graduate and how you see this as a vehicle to empower students?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's really centered on our belief about students in our district, that we believe our students are leaders and critical thinkers who embrace diversity and pursue excellence in all endeavors. And so I started my first year here with my students. I have a student ambassadors group, and we built this portrait of profile of a graduate. And, in the past, it's been called soft skills. And in our profile of a graduate's communication, creativity, critical thinker, self-discipline, and well-rounded. And none of those things are inherently linked to technology. They're skills of really building relationships and partnerships. And through these different profile or traits, we're able to access or learn content to really empower our students to be successful.
You touched on starting to build this with the students first. Can you just expand on kind of where that came from? Because I think it's easy for us to build off of other reasons, but not focus on that student first. So just talk to us a little bit about that. Like, where did that idea to start with the student come from?
Well, it actually came from a professor I had my first year of college. Her name was Dr. Joanne Dewey, and she said in one of my classes, never do a job a student or a child can do. And so through my whole career, like as a teacher, when I had 27 students, I made 27 jobs in my classroom. So every student could have a job. And then as I became a principal and now as a superintendent, I've looked at how can we leverage our students' gifts and talents to be that voice. I haven't been a elementary, middle, or high school student in a long time, and our kids' experience now is very different from what I experienced as a student. And so I'm in no position to impose on our kids, here's how it should be done. It's really lifting their voices. So that's really where the the seed was planted, I guess I'd say, with Dr. Dewey, with leveraging our students and their voices.
And I'm really curious because as you're sharing about that sentiment. I mean, that quote, never do a job that you can have a student do, I think is a really powerful statement to walk away from today's conversation with. But I really wanted to just call out how you mentioned that you haven't been a middle school student yourself for a really long time. And a lot of these items that we're talking about, the portrait of a graduate or competency-based education as a whole, is moving away from the traditional education system. And part of that is to break the mold. And how are we going to break the mold if we're just replicating what the experiences that we had were as teachers or as students, rather, right? So I think it's a really important kind of call. It's a nice sentiment that's kind of where this work started.
Yeah. Well, and you saying that makes me reflect. My leadership team and I are reading a book on leadership, and it's by Michael Connor, and I'll get the title wrong. It's about bold, agile leadership in the after COVID stage of learning. That, before COVID was a very industrial model of education. During COVID, we were ideating. Nobody knew. We were like, how do we do this thing remotely, not in person? And now we're in the AC or after COVID stage. And he talks a lot about this in his book, and it's how do we transform really what we're doing as school systems for our kids. And when I link that to our profile of a graduate, these traits of communication, creative, critical thinker, self-discipline, and well-rounded go across all disciplines, all experiences, and again goes back to that relationships, because at the end of the day, no matter whether we're remote or in person or whatever profession, it is all about relationships at the end of the day.
Sure. And to build on that, I know that within your district, you're doing a lot of amazing work to begin to kind of enhance that student voice. How have you seen this creation of the profile of a graduate, and what have you kind of seen it do to help now actually start enhancing your students' voice after doing it for a few years?
Yeah, I've tried as a superintendent to lead by example with it and with the profile. And so we haven't fully, enmeshed it through our system as a whole. So it's not necessarily fully overt within, but it is something that we question ourselves on. How are we giving students the opportunity to build their communication skills or to communicate? So if I look at that one as an example, I look at it as a superintendent, I have my students they're chairing our district podcast. They're doing like the easy one, but announcements at their schools. They're speaking at our ribbon cuttings and groundbreakings. They're leading our district. I do an annual state of the district. They're introducing and doing the transitions at all of these things. Every chance we get to put our kids in front, we do. Look at creative. What are opportunities we have to allow our students to flex their creative muscle outside of where we usually think creative is in an art class. Well, there's other places we can be creative as well, and helping the kids think outside the box. Like we opened this year a new early childhood center, and our pre-K and kinder students at the time, they're now third graders, we read a book to them on If I Built a School. And then we had them draw pictures of what they would put in their school. And we use those to then design the entire school.
There's a few things here, Michelle, that I wanted to kind of hit on. And I'm going to do my best to keep track of where I'm at, because there's three really big curiosities that I have. The first one is, as you're talking about leading by example and questioning how we want students to display certain skills or competencies, where are you asking these questions? Like, in what forums are you and your team asking each other these questions to create opportunities?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. Well, one, we have I have a weekly cabinet meeting with my district leadership, but then also once a month, I have a meeting with all of our district leaders who are directors, principals of all different departments, all in the same room, student nutrition, transportation, maintenance, along with our principals. But then I have a teacher advisory that I meet with, and it's the teachers of the year from each school for the last 2 years. I'm asking it there. Also with my student ambassadors, I mentioned, I am asking them. And then also with the different community groups that I'm part of. There's times where it comes up, I'm on the board for the chamber. So there's times when I'm getting to ask there, with our EDC, Economic Development Corporation, and in all these different community events. And then also with our school board, we're asking them around these potential opportunities. Actually, tonight we have a board workshop, and the board will be doing some visioning of what do you envision for the future of our district. And really, I want to push their thinking outside the box from a traditional school or experience for kids.
I think it's a really interesting idea to push the board's direction and mindset, because again, they're coming from a system that was traditional, and a lot of challenges that we hear districts talking about when they start to implement a profile or start making these shifts is, how do we communicate it to the community so that they actually understand it and they're going to see the value in why we're doing these things, because they are very different. Mm-hmm. And it seems like that's a good chance and a good opportunity to do it.
Right. And I think it's I don't teach kids anymore. My students, so to speak, are the adults that I interact with. And so how can I continue to, challenge all of our thinking, even challenge my own thinking to just think differently, and rather than saying a no or why, it's more of a why not?
Right.
What's the worst that could happen? Let's try it.
And I'm a believer, and whether it's me being a hopeless optimist or not, that, I believe in failing forward every step of the way.
Yes. I agree completely. And, as much as I've said this so many times before, of I hate making mistakes, and especially when they're public, but at the same time, I've always learned so much more when I do make mistakes, and it's uncomfortable, but it's, I look at, we're always telling kids, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to make messes, learn from them, and get better. And we aren't always as good about that as adults, and allowing ourselves to make mistakes. And sure. I love what you said about the fail forward, because that's what it is. That's what is helping us grow and evolve.
And I think it just builds on that leading by example. Like, if you as the leader are able to be vulnerable in those situations and try these things, just imagine what that is telling to your staff and the culture that you're creating in your district.
Yes. Yeah. I appreciate you saying that about vulnerability. That's something that we've talked about a couple years ago for our convocation keynote. Really talked about vulnerability and kindness and compassion and care, and the importance of being authentic. And one of the things that I shared, and I'd heard this from a speaker, and I can't remember who it was, but about everybody has an invisible backpack, and I equated it first to our students. We don't know what our students are carrying in that backpack, what happened the night before, what their morning has been like. But then I also challenged us of that even as adults, we are all carrying invisible backpacks as well. We have hurts and hang-ups and things that are happening to us, but we come in with our game face to be our very best for the kids that we serve and are growing. But to allow ourselves that space to get to know each other and be there to support one another through, again, the relationships. But yeah, I believe really in leading by example. And you could probably ask anyone in our system about authenticity and how I lead in that manner with them.
And I think that's good advice. The idea of the invisible backpack, it's a really great metaphor to imagine what this looks like. Obviously, as a teacher and a former fifth grade teacher, I made it a really intentional purpose to have that check-in with students every morning. I had a classroom that had a large ELL population. So it's really challenging just at face value to understand where they're at on that day, and with the challenges that our students are facing more so now than ever before, whether it's the home life, have they even had a chance to eat food that morning? Like, where are they at to advance in their learning? I think it's an important and frankly an easy thing for a teacher to have that chance to check in.
Yeah. And you're right. It's actually really easy. And, in this time when so many kids and just people in general are saying, does anyone see me? Does anyone know that I'm here? That check-in is so critical for students and adults alike. And that part, it does tie really into the culture that's being built in whether it's our district or any place.
Well, I think that any place is really important, especially as, leaders are thinking, and anybody who's listening to this show, if you're not directly in a district, we face it being a remote company where you're talking to your colleagues on instant messaging more than you're seeing them face to face. And it's really easy to misunderstand tonality of a message, not to think about the invisible backpack when somebody's sending you a message. You have no idea what they're going through that day, what they had happen last night. It's really easy to forget how to be empathetic when you're sending direct messages and not having any face-to-face, right? And I think it's people just need to often take one step back before two steps forward and think a little bit more about that it's a person. It's not just a name on the screen or another student in the grade book, right?
Yes. Yeah. I appreciate that. It's that taking a step back, or I find myself like, if I'm starting to think, where is that coming from? Just taking a deep breath and that pause and oxygenate myself, but that pause and before speaking, because I think words are very, very powerful, and that once something's out, you can't take it back. And so I'm very cautious of trying to just be very mindful of what I'm saying and the impact that what I'm saying or doing has on others. Mm-hmm.
And, to kind of pull it back, because I did tell you I had two curiosities, and I think it's a good time to hit on the second point. As you're sharing more about, building relationship with these students, and you're creating a culture for rich experiences to be had by your students. You mentioned a few examples, having students come to ribbon cutting ceremonies, when you do your, board meetings, having that student voice an example. I'm curious, how are you selecting these students to have these participatory opportunities? Where is there a sign-up sheet? Are you finding students that are succeeding in certain ways? How are you picking these kids?
How are we finding them, huh? Well, there's a couple of different ways. Like my student ambassadors, before teachers would nominate students and say, here's a student who I think would be great. But I also was clear, I didn't want only the kids who are the all A honor roll or the B. I wanted kids from different groups. I wanted kids who are considered at risk, and their voice matters. Their voices sometimes are frequently not heard. This year I did an application process, and so staff could nominate kids, but then kids could nominate themselves. And so I will. Every Thursday, I spend visiting campuses and departments. And a big part of that is because I want to keep connected to our kids and our staff. And when I'm visiting schools, like there was one, he was an 8th grader last year. And I remember visiting him at the middle school and talking with him. I said, hey, when you get to the high school, when the application comes out to be on my student ambassadors, I'd love for you to apply. I think you would be a great candidate and could really add to our ambassador council. So that's a part of it too. So the staff can nominate. I may identify some hey, I want to hear more from this one. For speaking at different presentations, we did a Teacher of the Year celebration, and so this last year we had students speak about their teacher. So it was a student who was in that teacher's classroom that introduced their teacher. So it comes in various ways that kids get selected to be part of this.
The student ambassador program, I think, is really great. And I think a lot, again, of organizations could really take value in that nomination opportunity. I particularly like the strategy of the student-to-student opportunity to highlight each other's work. It's great that an adult can come and recognize the student and see that student say, I want your voice to be heard, but it's so impactful when it's coming from one of their peers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it makes me start to think about motivating and how students can help motivate themselves and take ownership of their learning experiences. So what I'm really curious about here, Michelle, is how you start to see the profile and these experiences help to motivate your students? How do you see it forcing them or providing them the chance to take more ownership in their learning?
Mm-hmm. I think, I look at part of the purpose of a public education institution is to provide students opportunities to grow and develop with a safety net that's there, so they're not just thrown to the wolves, so to speak. So I look at, if I go to the podcast, we have a student who hosts our district podcasts, and they've done one with me and one of our state legislators, and so we're putting them in a safe environment where they're really uncomfortable, but we've given them that safety net, and we're able to pause and say, it's okay. Speaking at events publicly, if I mess up, people are like, oh, no, she doesn't know what she's doing. But if a kid messes up, they're like, oh, that's so great, keep going. And so the crowd is there supporting them too. So it's, again, that safe environment. I don't know if I really answered the question, but I just feel like we can provide, with our profile of a graduate, we're giving students these experiences, again, in a safe place where we can catch them if they trip, and they're getting to fall forward or fail forward. And they're not really failing, they're just learning. It's like, oh, I can do that better next time.
Well, I think that's such an important call out, I can do it better next time, because we've been seeing these experiences providing students a chance to just receive really authentic feedback from voices that they might not have received feedback from traditionally. Yes, they're getting to interact with their teacher, but through profile, a lot of community members are being involved in ways that they haven't had that chance. So now they're getting that perspective being brought in, which I think is a really, really interesting one.
I agree. And I also think that it allows our community members to see that today's kids are really amazing. There's so many different versions of what people think of other people. And I think that sometimes kids are underestimated. And there are things that, oh my gosh, they're doing things, they're so creative. They're doing things on TikTok and things outside of school where they're creating content. And that is, again, outside of school, but they're just getting to grow and develop in ways that is beyond the school. And kids are getting, we as a district are providing students the opportunity to be outside of the four proverbial walls of a school and help people just outside of the school see how great kids are, and just that intellect and that inquiry in our kids. I think of, when kids are little, and when we're little, we're so inquisitive and curious, and we're willing to try all sorts of things and make mistakes, and then when we get to about middle school-ish, we start to be really aware of what people are thinking about us. And if we can nurture that curiosity throughout life, how much better that would be for kids.
And I'm curious because I'm hearing you talk about how the community is becoming connected, and they're seeing how amazing their students are. How are you guys providing visibility back to the community on this work the students are doing?
Well, one of the ways, we've got several different ways. One is, I mentioned earlier, we do an annual State of the District, and many districts do something like that. And ours, though, we have something called our Student Showcase. And so like this one we just had a few weeks ago. In our Student Showcase at our State of the District, we had probably 20-ish different booths that were led by students, and they were showcasing their work, and they were engaged. And one of the challenges we gave them was to make your booth engaging and interactive so that when all these people come to see, you're getting to talk with them. So there were students who had created this math challenge. And so like I would go into the booth, or our industry partners would go into the booth and challenge a student. They were racing to solve a problem. There were others around literacy. They were showcasing some of our experiential learning that we're doing at the middle school. And so that people could see what our students are doing, but it was led by the students saying, hey, here's what I'm doing in school and here's what I'm learning. which builds in their skills around the profile of a graduate. We also, I've mentioned our podcast, that is pushed out through social media, and people hear our students leading that. We have our GPTV crew who are live streaming our games and doing videos, or they're putting together promo videos for different industries or business partners. So they're getting to see our kids. So as much as we can put our students front and center, we do. We also have every week we showcase a student. Last year they were rising rock stars because that was our theme. This year it's wonderful wildcats because our theme is wonder. And so it's about a student, and they talk about their experiences. And then when that gets posted to social media, their parents or family or friends see it, and then it gets spread more. So people are seeing, oh, this is what's going on. These are the kids that are in our schools.
As you're talking about these experiences, it makes me just think, man, I wish I could go back to high school. Because, like these experiences are so amazing, and I can see how, it can be tied to academic content areas, but more so it's just putting it into the hands of the student to tie into something they're passionate about and be able to work through the problem and to share it. That's the thing that I think a lot of us forget about, is students love to share what they're doing. They love to, brag about what they've had the opportunity to go through, and whether it's good or bad, they just love to be able to share about it. And we can't forget that.
Right. No, you're absolutely correct. They like to, show what they're doing.
Now, you mentioned experiential opportunities, and I know you are, or had just finished building an early education site, which, from what I understand, is really looking to provide experiential learning across your system. Can you just talk to me about kind of what that looks like and how you see that evolving into more opportunities for your students?
Yeah, thank you. We opened this pre-kinder and kindergarten center, and all of our 4 and 5-year-olds go to this school. And in it, there's 36 classrooms, 18 of which are experiential. And what that means is each of them is really like a mini museum. So there's the Marvelous Me room, and it's all about the human body. There's a giant operation table where kids are learning about the bones and their bodies. They've got stethoscopes in there where they're getting to listen to their heart. They've got a giant mouth that has teeth, and they learn about how to brush their teeth and floss. There's other rooms there, like the safari room. There's a Gulf Coast room, and the intent with these experiential spaces is to build literacy and numeracy for our students. There is a lot of research around that shows that there's a 30 million word gap for students who start school based on their experiences before entering school. And so our aim is, through these experiences, kids are building their literacy and numeracy skills so that when they leave and go on to first grade, we've leveled the playing field for our students. Doesn't matter if they're rich or have not as rich, but that when they leave, we have leveled that playing field for them to be successful in first grade on up. So each of the rooms, there's not desks. It's very hands-on and interactive and engaging. And when I visit the classrooms, all the kids are doing something different, but they're in their experience. There's I call it the dinosaur room. I can't remember the official name of it, but there's a giant dinosaur, and there's all sorts of dinosaurs, but they're learning, how to count, but they're counting out different dinosaurs. They're working on their fine motor control, with using tongs, or, so that they're building that physical skill as well. The other thing that we've seen with it is the social interaction, because there's not necessarily a high tech in these spaces, because the whole point is the engagement and interaction with the environment and with the content. And then that builds through our system, we were very strategic in selecting experiential rooms that align to what's happening at the high school level with our career and technical programs. High schools typically now are very experiential on the career and technical side. We've got a strong culinary program. We've got an agri-science program, health sciences, where it's all hands-on. They're working with our health science. They're working on syndavers, or synthetic cadavers, where they're getting to learn about the muscles and the bones and how to treat patients. But then we build that from So early childhood, it's very basic, but building the literacy and numeracy around those areas. And then our elementaries are weaving in experiential learning through a lot of STEM-based activities, and that engineering and sciences and math. And then middle school, we've built in career explorations, where students are working in modules for about 10 days, where they have hands-on learning on whether it's engines, electricity, renewable energy, et cetera. They have culinary there that, again, that align to what's going on at high school, and then also aligns to what our local industry needs are, so that they're getting prepared for high wage, high demand jobs that exist.
Essentially, you're building, you're completely changing the environment. You're completely changing the model of our traditional classrooms, and I'm curious what that's doing to the physical spaces in your grade 1 up. Because if a student is coming in from this experiential kindergarten classroom where it was very hands-on, yes, the grade 1 classroom is going to be doing some more STEM-based interactivity, but I imagine that student's not going to be able to come into that classroom and sit in a row, and that seat time is going to look very different. So do you see this starting to sort of shift, or have the conversations around, hey, this is going to really shift our physical layouts a lot?
Yes, it's actually kind of freaking people out a little bit, because the adults, the kids are fine, but as adults, our first grade teachers have said, oh my gosh, we're going to have to change what we're doing, because they're going to come from this really immersive environment, a very engaging, interactive environment, and come into our traditional rooms and maybe not want to be in them. We need to change it. How are we cognitively and experientially engaging our students? And that's definitely a mindset shift for us as the adults, because we're, in that command and control kind of modality of, okay, we've got to keep all these students on track and learning. And it can be challenging to think, how do I personalize this for 20 to 22, 24 students in my classroom, right, so that they're all growing? And then how do I keep track of all of that?
It's a big question to ask. And I think the personalization factor is it's a tough one for teachers to bridge that gap when they're not used to it. But I feel like it's one of those things that teachers are doing a lot of that already, and they just don't really know it, because it's not aware to them, or it hasn't been quite named. Something like we talked about, that easy 5-minute or 30-second check-in with a student each day. Like, that is starting that day off, personalizing the experience for the student by just getting that check-in. And a lot of teachers don't even know it, because it's just something that they do naturally.
Yeah. Now, you make up a good point with that. And I think too, it's when we look at, I think there's an opportunity to teach adults outside of our school, like our families, to how this looks different. It's hard. Like I grew up with, you get a grade. You get an A through F, and an A means you're doing good, potentially. But does it really? And so as families, families want to be supportive of their kids and help them learn as much as possible. And when there's not it's helping the adults and our families really understand, okay, how is this different? And how do I know that my kids are really learning and what they're mastering? So it's a disruption to what we've known as education, in a sense, and that whole, I guess, feedback loop.
And as that feedback loop, has there been thought or consideration? You mentioned your teachers thinking, how are we going to measure this or track it? Like, what would you say today is displaying effective practice or effectiveness towards your profile? Is there vehicles that you guys are using to start that measurement process?
We don't have anything formal yet. We have informal things. Big part, we've talked in some of our schools are doing a little differently than others, and having students really monitor their own progress. We do a pretty good job in early childhood of having a standards-based report card, so to speak. Like I can say all my letters and I can count up to 25 and then 50 and so on. But really, what does that look like throughout the whole system? How do we know that a student has mastered the content? Aside from, we have, of course, standardized tests, which, it's important to be held accountable to, what's the minimum level of learning that should happen. But how can we go above and beyond that and be able to know if someone's on track for graduation?
Sure.
I've looked at, with our early childhood center, I keep thinking, and I think this goes back, happened decades ago, was age, non-age grades. Just because someone's 6 years old, they go into first grade. Well, does that mean they're really ready for first grade, or if they already mastered that? What's so magical about 6? And now in this after COVID stage, how does that look different? And what would it look like for that 6-year-old who's maybe mastered everything that's in this traditional first grade level to be working on some third grade content?
It's an interesting idea, especially with a lot of the behavioral challenges that we're hearing teachers facing. And so much of what I think about is it just because that student's bored? Like, have they already mastered that? They were at home and perhaps they had a family who exposed them a lot to books when they were at home throughout COVID. Maybe they are far advanced in literacy. Maybe they're just bored and that's why they're acting out. Or, it's a really interesting question to consider. But I mean, what I love about hearing you speak of where you're at with your profile is that you are focused on the student experiences and you didn't delay those experiences because you had to, as a district, think, how are we going to measure this? And, dot the I's and cross the T's, because so many districts that we work with or that we hear from are 3-4 years into the process because they want to perfect every aspect of it before they launch, right? And I think that that's what's amazing about the work you guys are doing is you're just iterating as you go, learning as you go, and tweaking it as you go.
Well, I think that's where we are now. If we look at how quickly technology is evolving, we cannot, we can plan something to death and not ever really get things off the ground. And so it's hey, let's just dip our toe in it. And I think then that's where me as the leader, me leading by example, is hey, let's just give this a try. If it works, great. And if not, okay, then we look at, is that something we need to tweak and revise? It's messy, and it's about progress and not perfection.
Progress and not perfection, I think, is a perfect, put that on the walls of your school. I think that's a really important message. Well, and I think it's an important message for students to know. Michelle, one of my favorite shows of all time is Shark's Tank. I absolutely love that show. The Canadian version of it is Dragon's Den. It's and how many times are those entrepreneurs saying, you spend years and years trying to perfect something and then you go to release it and it doesn't hit the mark. And how much time and effort and money did you invest in doing that? Because what was perfect 5 years ago when you were trying to perfect it, life has changed, the world has changed, now you're missing the mark. Right? Yeah. And it's all about progress. And I think that's a really important message.
Yeah. Well, I think that kids, especially younger kids, are really good at the messy. And as adults, when I first read Carol Dweck's book on mindsets and growth mindset, I was like, oh yeah, I had a fixed mindset about myself where I have to be perfect. I have to get this right. But for everybody else, I had a growth mindset. But looking at, how do we as adults have that growth mindset for ourselves and the things that we're creating and building?
We need to all keep remembering. I think we're pretty fortunate that a lot of teachers understand that. Maybe they don't give themselves the time and space to do the reflection. I think of teachers that I had the chance to work with who were 10-year, 15-year vets in the same grade range, and a policy shifts or a curriculum comes out and it's like the end of the world and they have to make some adaptations to their practice. But I think inherently they want to be reflective and they want to continue to grow given the time and space to do so.
Oh, I would absolutely agree. Everybody, at the end of the day, our educators absolutely adore the kids that they're working with and want to give their very best to them.
It makes me just think a little bit, Michelle, towards the future. And I'm curious that, how you as a leader see the profile of a graduate continuing to evolve within your district.
Well, we've been looking, actually, I was talking with my board about, currently we have our graduation plans and you have to get so many credits and we weight classes for GPA. And we've got kids who are playing the GPA game and we've tinkered with, but what if our portrait profile of a graduate was part of their graduation plan more? And that's maybe, what if we didn't weight classes? I mean, we'll still have to do that, but what if it was more around this profile of a graduate that is well-rounded, and is it a portfolio that kids are putting together to be able to show how they've developed this profile? So it's still, like, what does this really look like? And I really see, again, going back to my students and talking with them and saying, okay, this is what we said we want you to know and be able to do when you graduate. Yeah, there's all the content, all of your coursework and all of that. But these are the skills that, your industry partners that we've worked with have said, this is what we want kids to graduate with. And so how do we measure that? And really asking the kids, how do you think you should demonstrate this as a student?
It's almost full circle how we're talking now again, putting it back into the hands of the student to share their voice. And a lot of leaders that are further ahead say that the best way to provide the chance is, have the students do self-reflections, show the evidence, and allow them to make those connections themselves. And yes, there's great ways that you can have resources created at a district level to say, well, if you're in English class, this is how you can have students develop critical thinking or whatnot. And those are important to do to have teachers feel supported with these initiatives. But just ask students, hey, you just went through 3-4 different subject areas. Make the connection. How are these experiences showing that you can problem solve? Tell us about it.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm. No, I love that. I think that's really powerful. That reflection, we mentioned earlier how as adults, we don't always make the time to reflect. And how do we, but then here, let's teach our students about the value of that reflection and how that continues to help us grow.
It is really important advice. And I'm curious from your side, Michelle, we have a lot of leaders who are having these visions, having these conversations, wanting to bring a profile of a graduate into their district. What sort of advice would you give a leader who's looking to do this? Go
for it. What's the worst that could happen? But I think going to the kids, and the other key that I had my students initiate it, and then they had their initial thoughts, and then they took it to several different groups to get feedback to refine it. So they took it to my teacher advisory and had them review it. They presented to them and said, here's what we're thinking, what's missing, what or what should be taken out. And then they made refinements. And then they present it to all of our district leaders. And again, the students were sharing with them and they were getting feedback. They took it to our industry partners, community leaders, and said, here's what we're looking at. When we graduate, we feel these are the areas that we need to be solid in. And they gave additional feedback. So it's not just doing the first draft, but getting feedback from people who are going to end up hiring our kids or interacting with them in the community and in the future. And then it also, I think, builds momentum with, like when they presented to the teachers and to the leaders, they saw, oh, the kids are doing, this isn't Cavazos' thing. This is coming from the kids. Right. This is what they said. Again, I always think back, people listen to kids more than they do adults frequently.
Well, and it had me think as you were saying that, did you feel because it came from the students first that you were able to just get the buy-in from your staff in a much easier way? Because it didn't come from you, it came from your students?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yes. But I think we still as a system have a really great opportunity to infuse this more through our system, because we built it and haven't fully actualized it yet. And we may be never, because we're always evolving, so it may never be fully there, But it's like you said, okay, we plan, and then we launch it. So we've done it and we've put it out there, and there's still so much more we can do with it.
Right. Last question we ask every guest this Michelle, and I'm really curious from your stance, where and why do you see the portrait of a graduate or profile of a graduate being critical to the future of our K-12 education system?
I guess I think that it's a report card of sorts for students, but I think it's critical because of the components that are part of it. Our last one on ours is well-rounded, and I think that many profiles of graduates that I've seen are about that well-roundedness. And I think that that's really critical when I think of the future, like as kids are graduating, people are changing jobs frequently, changing professions. And so these profile of a graduate are not profession specific. Mm-hmm. They can be translated across all systems, all groups, all professions. They're just, at the end of the day, tend to be traits that are good for being a good human being and contributor to society. And I think that's what makes it really critical. I think that, speaking as of today, that it is the societal narratives can be really challenging and can seem very negative. And I think that there's so much good out there that we don't always hear. And that if we as a school system can graduate kids who have skills in these different areas, they have an opportunity to really continue to make our world a much even more livable place and even better than they inherited.
Today we're talking about progress, not always perfection, to amplify our student voice, provide real life opportunities so that our students can become strong, contributing members to the modern world. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us here on the show. It's been amazing getting to hear your insight, and I appreciate how you are day in and day out looking to be vulnerable and lead with example across your district.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure.
That was leader and the 2024 ESC Region 2 Superintendent of the Year, Dr. Michelle Cavazos. Hey, thanks so much for listening to the show, and please make sure to hit the follow button on your podcast app so you never miss an episode. I'm Jordan Lewis, and you've been listening to the Growth Over Grades podcast.